Hello, and let's see, is that working? Hopefully you can hear me. Right, so have you got your scientific head on? This is all about menopause and specifically about how menopause is affecting our bodies. A lot of people get concerned or experience weight gain, loss of strength, increased injuries as they go into perimenopause and obviously through menopause and through to the other side of it. And so I'm going to talk today to help you understand what's happening. This is something that's been really important to me in my own journey because I just sort of really didn't, apart from, knowing the obvious thing about, periods stopping from menopause and not being able to get pregnant, I really didn't know much else about it. I knew about obviously things like hot flushes and not being able to sleep, all those really common things. There's a lot of focus on those types of symptoms, and for good reason, because they are really disruptive to our everyday life. But we don't know very much or hear an awful lot about what's actually changing in our bodies on a physiological level and how that's affecting not only our body composition in terms of, how much we're retaining muscle and also bone and how much our fat levels are changing, but also even understanding how that impacts how what we eat affects our body, how we exercise affects our body. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Feel free to sort of share this with anybody that you need, that you think would benefit from it, because I think the more we understand this, then the better we can make better decisions, not waste our time and our energy on chasing our tails and doing things that might have worked when we were younger, but just really aren't appropriate for us now and don't bring us any benefits. So this is going to help you have a smarter plan for yourself and make better decisions that are going to be more likely to give you an outcome that you want. And that's important. So, okay. So things that I'm going to talk about at the moment are in this session are why you gain weight even when your diet doesn't change. A lot of people experience that. And then also why fasting and very low calorie diets don't seem to make a difference either. People go into this time of their life gaining weight. The natural response is to eat less. Fasting starts to become really popular, but it's not always a guarantee that we're going to lose weight. In fact, we can see that, we can gain weight or it just becomes really stubborn. Where do you go? You can't just keep going down to eating practically nothing or spending hours of your day not eating. So this is going to help you understand that a lot more. Okay. Now then, one of the things that happens, which is really easy to understand, in women, muscle mass peaks between the age of 30 to 35. So that's just like a normal us at our peak. And then after that time, it declines very slowly. And that rate of decline increases when we go through menopause. It also increases, when we get into about our 70s as well. So that rate of loss starts to accelerate the older we get. And we don't want that to happen because it affects our strength, it affects our balance, our bones are declining at the same time because muscles have a direct impact on how strong and healthy our bones are. So it's really important that we reverse that. And whilst I'm going to tell you a lot of things in this video, I'll be honest now, that make you think like, it's all stacked against me. Well, the answer is actually really simple. Okay, so we have still got a lot of agency. There is still a lot of stuff that we can do about it. And just so you know here, I mean, I don't really know, to be honest. I don't think there's a lot of studies on HRT and how HRT influences what I'm going to talk about today. A lot of the studies on HRT are more to do with the symptoms they address. There is a little bit of data on how it can help improve the rate of decline of bone strength, but not very much on weight gain or muscle loss. Okay, because muscles really, it's a use it or lose it situation. So exercise is really important. But for transparency, I don't take HRT. And I just want to say that not for any other reason other than you will know from maybe following me on social media that I'm undergoing a weight loss and muscle gaining process, as much to illustrate the effectiveness of what I'm going to tell you now. And just to know that there's no hormones involved as part of that. Okay. So hormones won't affect that in a negative way, but just knowing that it's not giving me a bit of a leg up either. So it's me being able to do this just with my body as it is now, going through this natural aging process. So the amount of calories that we burn a day is linked to the amount of muscle mass we have and also how active we are. And as I've just said, as we age, this muscle mass goes down and we also tend to become less active. So both of those things mean that we need fewer calories to maintain our weight. And that's why if our diets haven't changed for years and we pretty much eat the same now as we ever used to, we can still experience weight gain because we don't need as many calories as we did 10 years ago. And in theory, it's a bit more complicated in practice, but even eating as few as 100 calories a day, more than we need, can add up to 10 pounds extra weight in 12 months. So the margins are actually quite small. Now, what's important to know now at this age is that it's not just about calories. And this is key. So, and this is why diet things that you might have done before, like a Weight Watchers or Slimming World, where less calories can help with, losing weight, cannot work now, because it's also about hormones. They're playing a really significant role in what's happening in our bodies. And it's also about how understanding how different foods affect our bodies in different ways. Okay. So it's not just how much we're eating that we need to know about. It's more about what we eat now at this stage of our life. Now, just going to talk very briefly about estrogen and just go through some of the key functions that relate to changes in the body through our declining levels of estrogen. This is the depressing bit, right? Just being honest. So they affect our appetite regulation. So hands up if you've had lots of cravings through menopause. They affect our serotonin, so our happy hormones. Hands up if you've experienced that. Also, insulin sensitivity, and that means our ability to process carbohydrates. It affects our muscles. The reason we need carbohydrates is for our muscles to use as immediate fuel. And it actually reduces the ability of our muscles to store fuel. It also reduces the ability of our muscles to use fat as fuel. And it also affects our body's ability to release fat from our stores for our body to use as fuel. Okay. And then moving stored glucose in from muscles, out of stored muscles into the bloodstream to use as fat. So we've got two major, well, there's more than two, but there's two major sources of fuel that we burn throughout the day. That's fat and carbohydrates. So basically what I'm saying is our body gets worse at releasing stored carbohydrates and stored fat to use them as fuel. Okay, so we've just become less efficient at tapping into those energy sources in our body. Okay, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on, but that's the key thing to know. Now, also the lack of or the declining levels of estrogen they reduce the signaling for our body to build muscle. So the sort of controls to build muscle come from our brains to use estrogen, and estrogen is part of that to build muscle, but that starts to go because there's less estrogen. So that gets impacted. And what also happens is we become less effective at using and absorbing protein. So if we're not eating a lot of protein, or our protein levels haven't changed over the years, we're actually not able to process as much of it as we get older. That protein, our body's ability to break down the protein into various components and shuttle it around our body to where it needs starts to reduce. Okay. The effects of our muscles don't just affect the muscle volume, as in our muscles getting smaller. They affect our strength, so our ability to lift heavy things, but they also affect our power. And that's our ability to move things fast and accelerate. So that could be sprinting, that could be just being able to move quick enough to catch something or to steady yourself. So it's affecting those both two aspects of the way our muscles work as well. And as we get older, we have a decreased reliance on carbohydrates as fuel. We don't need as much of it as we did when we were younger. Something else that happens with with estrogen, I should say, is it creates higher stress levels. Now, the more stressed we are, and this is, the changes are happening from within in terms of us experiencing stress more, and also less able to cope with stress. But let's remember, there's a lot of external factors in our lives that are putting us under stress. Those stress levels affect the hormones that are circulating in our blood. And when we're in a stressed state, it increases our body's catabolic process, which is when it breaks down lean mass and muscle to use it for food. So stress is actually attacking our muscles as well. And that decline in levels of estrogen is also affecting our total body inflammation. People notice a lot more aches and pains and things through menopause. That can be a side effect. And that's our, higher levels of inflammation through our body, which is also linked to lean muscle loss as well. So as all this muscle is declining from all of these processes, we're not needing as many calories. We don't need as many carbohydrates to function as we did before. We're not as good as using the stored energy in our body for fuel. And we know things like stress are also linked to an increase in abdominal fat. That's in men and women. And we also know, hello, volunteering, this is me, that stress is also linked to increased eating or stress eating or emotional eating, which in turn causes weight gain. So there's a lot of stuff happening here, and you can see how it's just all creating this degradation of or loss of muscle mass and just conditions that are going against us in terms of being able to maintain a healthy body composition. I'm just turning my heater off and see myself getting redder and redder. So with that in our minds, let's just think about typical eating habits, okay? Because most of the women that I ever work with, we rely on high carbs, our diets, quick and easy things, food that gives us pleasure. I talked about the fact that we can feel a little bit down. We need the sort of food to give us a bit of a kick of pleasure. We're not going to have broccoli and chicken when we need that. We're going to the biscuit tin or get the bag of crisps out or put some toast in the toaster. They're the things that we're going for. So we have these diets that are very, very carby and, quick and easy things that are easy to prepare, quick to grab, or just around us all the time when we're filling up our cars or in the supermarkets or taking food off our kids' plates. And we're just in this environment or in this world where it's just very easy to be constantly grazing on carbohydrates all the time. Now, I like to think about that almost like your phone plugged into the wall. So imagine your phone's got a battery storage, but you're plugging it into the wall. So you're never dipping into your battery. The battery's getting fuller and fuller and fuller until it's full, but you're not running off the battery. You're just running off the energy that's coming out of the plug. That's what it's like when you're constantly eating carbohydrates. And that means sugary stuff, crisps, etc. You've got this plenty of fat on your body, which is like your battery, but with the carbohydrates, when we eat too many of them, our body can't process them as effectively after menopause as it can before. And when we can't process the carbohydrates, they get stored as fat. So we're building up our battery. Yeah, we're never taking any of the fat out of the battery to use as energy because we're getting this constant supply of food from this grazing all the time. And that's what we're running off. We're running off this energy that we're just sort of feeding ourselves with. It's accumulating the fat in our body and we're never tapping into the stored fat and use that as fuel. And that can be something that just goes on for years. Ultra processed foods, if we eat a lot of those, so things that we're going to be getting from takeaways or too much treat food from, packaged stuff with lots of ingredients from the supermarkets, that's all linked to inflammation. So we've just got this, situation that is exacerbating the problems that we have from menopause through our diet. Okay. Now, Not everybody will recognize themselves as a constant carb grazer. I was very much in that for a good portion of time. I've also gone down the fasting, very low calorie route in the past as well. But that comes with its own problems as well, of course. Why would anyone make things easy for us? Because fasting and very low calorie diets in women are linked to increased stress. And we've already talked about that high stress levels put us in a catabolic state where we're burning muscle and hanging onto fat because our bodies, that's how it works when we're in that stress state. And very low calories, if we're constantly not eating enough, we can get by on it. We won't see any changes in our body composition, but we are we can see an energy symptom. We can see side effects or symptoms from that are very similar to menopause symptoms as well, like low energy, fatigue, poor exercise, recovery, sort of feeling burnt out all the time, thyroid issues, low appetite, bad sleep, disturbed sleep. And these are all things that have come from us running on empty through trying to eat too low, too little. And the reason we're trying to eat too little is to try and get rid of the body fat that we're accumulating, and it's not working. Now, something else that happens, this is my last bad thing, and then I'm going to tell you what the solution is before you switch off or think there's no hope, is our gut microbiome changes as well. So the amount of good bacteria in our guts is linked or declines in relation to declining estrogen levels. And you might notice, again, this is something I've suffered from, slower transit times, more bloating, worse digestion, constipation, really unpleasant symptoms that just make you feel like, oh, I remember that TV advert that felt like you were carrying a handbag that was full around with you. It's really unpleasant. And that's a part of that's linked to menopause as well, and the decline in estrogen. And that change in the gut microbiome means that the good bacteria dies off, and therefore it creates good conditions for bad bacteria to proliferate and take over. So the balance goes within our gut. And that's also linked to increased body weight too. That's the bad news. You're still with me and you want to know the solution, this is it. So where we need to focus now is, I've just told you a lot of things that are happening inside of our body that we really don't have any control over. This cascade of changes is coming from really the changing in the balance of our hormones, basically, and maybe a few things to do with, changing activity levels over time. But it's the way our hormones are changing that is leading to the changes in our body. And it would seem like there's nothing we can do, but there is. So but we have to look at the things that we can do for ourselves, what we call external stresses. And that can be a really powerful way for making up for the shortfalls or the changes in what our hormones are doing. Okay. And nearly everything that I've talked about just now, with all these sort of that feel quite negative, can be addressed through a combination of diet and exercise. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about exercise and diet. I'm going to talk about exercise first. So what the remedy now for that is heavy strength training primarily. Okay. You might go to the gym and do a body pump class, or as I did, just push the same weights around for years and years and years. But what we need now, if we really want to see some changes, is we need to switch to heavy strength training. Okay. And that's because that more aggressive external stimulation is what we need to force our muscles to adapt. Now, that has a number of benefits. It is going to give us a bigger trigger for our muscles to grow and get bigger and stronger. So that's going to improve our health outcome over time in terms of our strength and our improved balance. It's going to have an impact on our bone health, but it also improves our insulin sensitivity as well, because bigger muscles mean we can store more carbohydrates before we have to store them as fat. Okay. Once we get good and strong and we've got good technique with heavy strength training, we can add in HIIT, high intensity exercise. Now, high intensity exercise is a bit of a bandied around term, and you can do a HIIT class that lasts for, an hour in some places. But when we're talking about HIIT, we're really talking about the very high intensity exercise where you might be doing something like burpees or battle ropes or cycling on a bike, on a spin bike, at max effort that you can only do for at most 60, maybe a little, not 60, 30 seconds to 45 seconds before you then just can't carry on. Again, that's something to work up towards. So starting off with cardio exercise and then working your way up to being able to do HIIT. But that improves our ability to use the stored fat as fuel. We talked about that being compromised by our insulin, our estrogen, but HIIT improves our ability to use stored fat as fuel. It improves the insulin sensitivity again. It can reduce inflammation in our body. It improves hot flashes. So that becomes a really powerful thing that we can add. And the best thing about HIIT is you would only need to do about 5 or so of those 30-second flat out bursts with a similar rest twice a week. That's it. That's you done. Plyometric training is something else that you can add in once you've got good technique through your strength training. And that's basically jumping. Now, if you play tennis, you're getting that already because you'd be jumping around and moving in different directions. But it's essentially jumping. And that is where we can retrain power. Because if you were hitting, if you were springing off something and jumping, that's you using power. It's also putting stresses on our bones from different angles. And that's really useful to build in the bone density as well, more so than something like running, where you are just running in the same direction all the time. Doing plyometric training in multi-directional, as in tennis, is actually better because you're putting forces through the bones at different angles all the time, and that improves that bone integrity. So that's what you need to do, from an exercise point of view, to address some of the things that I've talked about. Something that doesn't work very effectively in addressing the issues with our body is what's called like a sort of a mid-level zone 2 exercise. So that's going for lots of long runs, for example. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing those long runs. You can enjoy them. They're good for your cardiovascular fitness, but they're not going to tackle the issues with the insulin sensitivity, the inability to use fat, or help your muscles. It might make you feel good and it might get you outside the house and away from everywhere in a bit of a clear head, but it's not going to tackle the issues that I've talked about. You have to do, if you're serious about changing your body composition, you need to look at doing the heavy strength training and then progressing into the HIIT and plyometric, and your cardiovascular exercise is there for your heart health and maybe for your sanity. But doing too much of any exercise now at this age is a bad thing. So if you're trying to do tons of cardio thinking it's burning fat, actually that could be being counterproductive as well, because you'll too often exercise puts you in a stressed state. And we talked about the stress state being when you actually start to break down muscle. So we want to be short, sharp, concentrated periods of very intensive exercise, so heavy weights, high intensity stuff, and giving ourselves plenty of time to recover, I should say, because that's when we go into a muscle building state. Okay. And for those of you who are sort of sold into some of the health benefits of fasting, it's worth knowing that exercise actually gives you some of the same benefits as fasting. So if you're worried about stopping with your fasts and going into eating 3 meals a day, if you're doing the exercise, or working towards what I've talked about here as an exercise model, then that's going to help you with many of those benefits there. But it's also worth knowing that that fasting works better in men. And there are studies that show that in women, it affects sleep quality, it makes stress markers worse, it creates It makes insulin resistance worse. So women don't need to do very extended fasts. A 12-hour fast is adequate for women. Yeah, so that will still give you some benefits. Plus your exercise, you're not going to miss out on the fasting benefits there. So just wanted to say that. So exercise, simple. Hard exercise, and it takes a little bit of time to progress up to that, but that's the prescription, if you like. From a diet point of view, and diet has a massive amount of power here as well. So even if you are not at the point where you feel fit enough or strong enough to do the heavy strength training or the HIIT, you can go a long way to managing these symptoms, these menopause symptoms through your diet. Okay. And the primary way to do that is to address your protein intake, because we need more as we age, because as I said earlier, we become less efficient at absorbing it. So we need higher levels of it. And increased protein consumption has been shown in several studies to play a key role in reversing that natural age-related decline in muscle mass and the increase in body fat. And they've done studies, for example, on post-menopausal women who aren't exercising, and when they've given them a high protein diet versus a control group who are eating a lower protein diet, they've increased their muscle mass and reduced body fat, even though the higher protein group were eating more calories than the low protein group. Okay, so a higher protein diet is going to help you lose fat and build muscle. What's not to love? How easy is that? And protein is absorbed more effectively if we spread our consumption of it evenly throughout the day. So that's why I recommend, when I talk about my 3 meals a day, having protein for your breakfast, protein for your lunch, and protein for your evening meal. So you're spreading out that protein intake throughout the day, so your body's able to absorb it. If you ate all your protein in one sitting, for example, your body can't deal with it as much, so some of that will be wasted. So when I talk about, I'm going to give you a meal plan tomorrow, but when I talk about how to plan your meals, plan them with the protein first. So if I'm putting a meal together, for my breakfast, I would be starting with getting my amounts of Greek yogurt right, so that I know I've got enough protein. And then I'm going to think about the other things that go with it secondary. For my lunch, it would start with the amount of chicken or fish I'm eating. If you're vegan, you want to be thinking about how much tofu are you having, and work it out that way. So plan your meals with your protein first to make sure you're getting enough throughout the day. Second priority in terms of volume is eating plenty of vegetables and plant-based food. And that is going to help with the gut microbiome that I mentioned before. And also you're just going to get whole tons and tons of nutrients from, plant-based foods. So that's something that you just really want to not skimp on. You want to fill your plates up with that. And I think this recommend 30 varieties a week is something. I eat about a pound of vegetables and fruits a day. But what vegetables and plant-based foods include all veg, all fruit, nuts, seeds, beans, peas, lentils, anything I've missed out, spices, herbs, coffee, dark chocolate. So there's a huge range, teas, there's a huge range of plant-based foods that are going to contribute and support your gut microbiome. And then there's also fermented foods like natural yogurts, kefir, sauerkraut, miso, things like that, kombucha that have got gut supporting prebiotics in there, probiotics, I should say. So combining those with lots and lots of different varieties of plant-based food is really going to help you restore that gut microbiome over time. Okay. Healthy fat's really important. Women need more than men. That can help just with that hormone balancing. And it also is important. There's a classification of fat-soluble vitamins. If we're not eating fat in our diet, then we're going to have trouble absorbing certain vitamins. So we just need to be mindful of that. And healthy fat sources are things like avocados, nuts, seeds, flax oil, olive oil, coconut oil, butter, those sorts of things, and foods that contain those things. So you want to be eating, it's not very hard to eat plenty of fats, to be perfectly honest, and it makes your food taste nice, but you'll be eating that throughout the day with your meals. Even cheese is a nice, it is a good option because that's got a nice source of fat in it as well. So that's key. All right. And then carbohydrates is the interesting one. Now, most vegetables, legumes, nuts, fruit are all a source of carbohydrates. So we don't have to fear carbs. Okay, they're really good for us. But the carbs that people are really interested in aren't the beans and peas and carrots. They're interested in the bread, the pasta, the rice, noodles, etc. Which, let's face it, we can eat. We don't have to sort of exclude them from our diet. But let's be honest here, they don't have as much nutrition in them. So we're going to get the nutrients that we need for a healthy body from protein, from healthy fats, and from all the vegetables and the fruits. But but you can eat carbohydrates. You can add all of those things. So it's all about proportions and maybe just being prepared to reduce the volumes that you eat. So more think about a little bit of what you fancy does you good, and think about increasing the healthy foods on your plate and reducing the sort of refined carbohydrates. So, for example, a breakfast, instead of having a couple of slices of toast and jam for your breakfast, you might be having one slice of toast with 3 eggs, bit of mashed avocado. That's a fantastic breakfast, yeah. Or, you're having pasta with 150 grams of meat, but you're weighing out your pasta before you have it, and that might be 100 grams of pasta on your plate that's cooked, which is going to be a lot smaller than most of the time that you eat. But at least it gives you that opportunity to have something that you really enjoy. It's just about getting used to different proportions. So the more active you are, so if you're someone who does a lot of training, maybe a lot of running, you'll be able to eat more carbohydrates than someone who is largely desk-based and just gets 2 or 3 strength training sessions in a week. So you would really have to look at reducing your carbohydrates in those instances. And, just accept there's some compromises that you need to make if you want to work on this reversing, this improved body composition over time. And one of the things that I think about, or my approach to carbs, is to be really selective and have the ones that you most like. So, there'll be things that you can take or leave. I can take or leave bread, pasta, rice, actually. I'd rather sacrifice those. Quite like to have a few potatoes, and then I'll have a bit of chocolate now and again, or a dessert. So that makes me happier. So I'm happy to do that and take the carbs away when I won't miss them, but know that I can plan in things that I like when I feel like it. Yeah. So tomorrow I'm going to give you a sort of a meal plan to follow. And this is where there's 3 meals a day, these 3 really good, solid, high quality, big meals a day come in, because they mean that you really fueling your body with all the nutrients that you need for the reasons that we've talked about today, and getting yourself out of this sort of either fasting and tiny meals or this constant grazing of very low nutrient foods throughout the day. And doing that can be very filling. It can reduce your hunger. It can reduce your cravings, simply because you're giving your body everything that it needs. And it'll thank you for that by turning off that constant search for food. Now, that doesn't always necessarily get rid of all cravings. So I'm going to be talking about cravings separately on a different day, just to give you a little bit more insight into that. But hopefully this gives you an insight into the value of nutrition and the impact it has on a peri and post menopausal body, and how it can help you manage that body composition change that's going to happen if you don't do something about it. Okay. But the great thing is we have a lot of agency, we have a lot of power and control to manage that ourselves. Okay. So I'm going to leave that there for now, because I know that that's quite a lot. Do ask me some questions if you have any that you want to put in the chat. Very happy to give you any answers as best as I can, or point you in the direction of more things to read if you're interested in knowing more about it. So thank you for your time. Thank you for watching that. Like I say, feel free to share that with people if you feel that will be useful for them. and I'll see you again soon. All right, take care. Bye for now.